it's gonna be alright.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Trans Stupid, where I take a look at the wonderful world of LGBTQIA++ news, because stupidity is intersectional. So this week, things are going to be done a little bit differently. Normally I cover a wide variety of different topics in the news, and as always, there has been a little bit of insanity going on, whether it's Pink News defending Jessica Yaniv over Blair White again, or it could be a gay magazine that's outraged that Pennywise the Clown is no longer a queer icon because he's apparently a little bit homophobic. Murdering children is fine, being against the gays is not. Whatever. But there has been a bit of a worrying trend over the last week on social media, and I'm sure a lot of my viewers know exactly where I'm going with this. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Contrapoints, or Natalie Wynn. Now, she is a left to quite far left trans YouTuber, probably one of the biggest YouTubers out there, and certainly the biggest name in breadtube, so to speak. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Contrapoints. I don't necessarily watch a lot of her videos, but I do know that opinions on her are generally quite mixed. Some people find her to actually be quite reasonable and at least hear the other side out, whereas others argue that she is a part of this quite vicious cancel culture that has developed over the last couple of years, and someone who is quite willing to judge other people as being fascists or transphobic or any other buzzword you can think of because current year. And Contrapoints was involved in a bit of drama over the last week on Twitter. And all of this started following a tweet by trans journalist Diana Tourget, where she said, "Sometimes it's funny when you're the only trans person in a space where everyone is announcing their pronouns. Like, it gets to you and a hush falls over the room and you can just check your phone because only cis people need to be working on their pronoun game." So this tweet actually resonated a lot with many trans women on Twitter, including myself. And interestingly, Contrapoints chimed in as well, saying, "This has happened to me before in hyper woke spaces. Like, it's me and a bunch of cis women and we all have to go in a circle saying she/her because I'm there. There's this paradox where I can go to a sports bar in North Carolina and be miss/mammed all night, no question. But in a self-consciously trans-inclusive space, I have to explain my pronouns and watch woke guys awkwardly correct themselves every time they say you guys. I guess it's good for people who use they/them only and want only gender-neutral language, but it comes at the minor expense of semi-passable transes like me, and that's super effing hard for us." And that is a point that I completely agree with. If you've ever been involved in one of these more hyper-leftist, queer, woke spaces, you've no doubt come across the bizarre practice of the pronoun circle, where people will be having a casual chat, only for someone to chime up and say, "Oh, we haven't announced our pronouns yet. We've all got to go round in the circle and say what our pronouns are." And the vast majority of the conversation generally goes like this. My pronouns are she/her. My pronouns are he/him. My pronouns are she/her. And so on and so forth. Because that's what the vast majority of people are, trans or otherwise. But occasionally you will get a few outliers. Someone will, for example, announce that they are a she/they, but because they are a they, but they don't mind being called a she for some reason. Or you might get a big old butch trucker telling you that they are a ma'am. Now, I've always found these pronoun circles to be quite awkward personally, especially as a trans woman who doesn't really spend a lot of time within all these circles anymore. I spent a lot of time on my transition, on medical and surgical, social, everything about me. And when I go out in the world, I'm read as a woman, believe it or not. And so when I enter these spaces, all of a sudden, I'm finding that all of that means nothing because Big Butch over there might decide that he's actually a she for tonight. It puts me on the same level as others who just haven't done anything, and it's like everyone gets blind to my transition. I much prefer spaces where people recognise who I am and will just treat me accordingly. If you're in one of these hyper-wokeist spaces, you kind of feel a little bit like a sham, that nothing you say or do really matters. because all you need for them sweet pronouns is just to say you have them sweet pronouns, and that's it. And this seems to be a view that's shared by a lot of trans women, and especially someone like Contrapoints, who is one of the more woke queens, as it were, of the trans community. And naturally, a trans woman expressing an opinion is going to get someone's backup. And naturally, it was the NBs who really rained down scorn on Contrapoints, as well as basically anyone who agreed with her, really. It got so vicious, in fact, that she had to delete her Twitter account because she was effectively cancelled by the non-binaries, who, even upon deleting her account, they still weren't happy. They still wanted more blood, and, you know, this is par for the course. But before I kind of get into why the viciousness of this cancel culture is the real issue here, I do want to highlight a couple more things. And one of those is the real usurping of the trans community by non-binary people. The trans community originally was trans men and trans women. We know we deal with gender dysphoria, we have medical pathways, we have social pathways, there's lots of different things we have to consider. But then all of a sudden come the hyper-woke NBs who decide that actually they are the biggest victims of all, and everything needs to revolve around them. And this really is at the expense of us. We find it very difficult to really take their arguments seriously because they're very much counterproductive to our own. We acknowledge that we have a medical condition, they are firmly against it. We understand that society's ideas of gender are kind of something which help us in our transition. What they want to instill instead is 72 million genders, each one more special than the last. And these are the same people who very much push self-ID, the idea that you just say that you are something and that's it, that you are the moon, or that you are, say, I don't know, again, the moon. I know it's a bizarre one, but hell, I've had people genuinely defend moon gender to me. And they're now the ones that are completely in control. And a trans woman speaking out against it and showing that there is a little bit of conflict is the one who is ultimately hounded out here. And this is very worrying because it just kind of means that we don't have a space to talk anymore. They are the ones who have successfully took the crown. Now, the big thing here, though, really is that someone ultimately felt that they had to leave social media simply because of a disagreement, because the response that they got was so rabid. But Contrapoints wasn't the only example of something like this happening last week, and the other example is one which is admittedly quite a little bit more serious. So I don't know how many of my viewers are aware of another YouTuber by the name of Rachel Oates. She does videos on science, atheism, puppies, a lot of different things. You should go check her out. A link will be in the description below. And there was a bit of an incident which happened between her and another YouTuber by the name of Essence of Thought. Now, there is a lot of background to this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but from my own understanding of it, I want to summarise it as much as I can. Back in May, a YouTuber by the name of Rationality Rules made a video discussing trans people in sport, a topic which has been covered a lot on this channel and is honestly one of the biggest debates of the last year. Now, naturally, someone talking about trans people in sport and not being openly enthusiastic or saying anyone and their pronouns can come join in is gonna attract the attention of the angry tranners, and that's exactly what happened. Now, Rachel is friends with Rationality Rules, and she stuck by him in this, saying that whilst there were things in the video that she disagreed with, ultimately, he's a good person, they're friends. But despite that, this drew the attention of some angry trans activists, including Essence of Thought, who accused her of siding with a man who has endorsed violence against trans people. Now, I should make it clear that I've not seen any evidence to suggest that either Rationality Rules or Rachel Oates have supported violence, and I would find it very shocking if either of them had. They don't come across as the kind of people who would do that, but naturally, this being current year, just simply having an opinion on something can be interpreted as violence if you go against the grain. So jump forward a couple of months and Rachel Oates releases a video on a Christian girl's reaction to a Taylor Swift song where the girl was clearly not happy with the amount of LGBTQIA++ representation in the video. Rachel points out that she wants to call out homophobia and transphobia where she sees it. And that reopened the floodgates from months earlier, where she attracted a lot of criticism, in particular from Essence of Thought. Long story short, the exchanges get quite heated, and Rachel makes it clear that this is impacting her mental health. Essence of Thought decides to ignore this and continues lashing out at her. Eventually, this came to a head last week when, in a rather distressing video, Rachel showed the true extent of this harassment and what it had done to her mental health. In the video, she'd clearly self-harmed, and it was obvious that she was going through a very tough time. Now, this was then brought to the attention of Essence of Thought. Now, one would think that, especially seeing the kind of steps that Rachel had taken, you would use this time to at least back off, kind of chill, let things rest. Unfortunately, Essence of Thought decided not to do that and accused Rachel of trying to shut down trans people again by harming herself. Now, I find this very strange because as I'm sure a lot of people have seen in these woke circles, so to speak, they like to act that mental health is something which should be taken very seriously. Bear in mind, these are the same corners of the world which invented the safe space, the trigger warning, where, as I mentioned, words are literal violence. So you would assume that they would take these things seriously and that they would also be sympathetic to someone who is clearly going through a breakdown. But no, that didn't matter at all. And because Rachel had dared to commit the crime of wrongthink, to associate with the wrong people, guilt by association, as it were, it was almost like any kind of respect had disappeared for her as a human being. Now, this video isn't to attack Essence of Thought. I do have my own personal opinions on this individual, but that would be taking this a little bit off topic, and I'm not really interested in internet drama. What I do want to discuss, however, is the fact that this was still able to be carried out, and this ties in with what happened with Contrapoints. What we're seeing is very vicious trans activists online who don't seem to care about what they are actually doing and what they are accomplishing. And they will go by any means necessary to try and shut down anyone who goes against the group thought. And this is particularly interesting when you consider that trans activists will often tell you that they are the most oppressed group, not just in the world right now, but in all of human history. Yet despite that, they are able to get people banned off social media. They're able to get people to potentially lose their jobs. They're able to report you to the police. We've seen many serious steps that trans activists have been able to take to get people shut down. And when they decide not to use these options, which are readily handed to them by various institutions, they still unleash mob justice, going after people like a pack of hyenas. And even when they see the full extent of the damage they're causing, they refuse to back down. This is something which is incredibly troubling to me. As a trans woman and someone who really wants there to be a more healthy conversation, this cancel culture which has grown incredibly over the last couple of years, whether it's just for a problematic statement or being associated with the wrong people, there's almost no forgiveness. And it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a progressive queen like Contrapoints. You can be someone who is still clearly just trying to learn their position like Rachel Oates. But neither of them are exempt from the group punishment that comes out. You committed wrongthink, and you should pay the price. And this is very much cult-like behaviour. Now, I'm sure that both Rachel and Contrapoints are going to bounce back from this. I would expect Contrapoints to be back on Twitter in the next few weeks, and I understand Rachel is now currently having therapy, and I hope she makes a full recovery from what really looked like a particularly harsh breakdown. But where do we actually go from here? it's all well and good to say, I thoroughly condemn what happened. But we all know that this has happened in the past and that this is going to happen again and again and again and again. There's almost no stopping it. And I don't know what we do. Do we sink down to their level, play by their rules? You know, I've always put in that I hold people to the same standards I would like to be held at. I wanted there to be more rational discussions and less mudslinging, less bile in the public discourse. But whatever standards we try and put, these trans zealots don't play by them. They have their own rule set. And it's nothing we say or do simply applies to them anymore. But I wouldn't want to sink to that level either. It makes them look awful, and by virtue of me being a trans woman, it kind of makes me look bad as well, as much as it shouldn't. And I don't want to add to that hostility. I want that to be cooled as much as possible. So do we just carry on the way that we have been, by trying to have more conversations and rationality and being open to people who don't even make mistakes? Because I want to make it very clear that neither Contrapoints nor Rachel Oates has done anything wrong here. Nothing at all. And it's important to be able to let them have discussions. And I don't think they should even change their opinions on this stuff, because I agree with both of their points that I've discussed. But something really does have to change. I'm sorry that I don't have the answer exactly as to how. I wish I did. I really wish I did, because I don't want to see this kind of thing happening. But it's almost like, what other things are there? What other way is there to progress here? Now, I know that I've only been focusing on 2 specific subjects this week, but ultimately, it's all the same thing. We are seeing a real rabid rise in the way people are conducting themselves online. The virtuous mob that decides that people can be cancelled for wrongthink. And we all lose out when this happens, because they're only going to get more and more authoritative. This is how they work. And I suppose the only thing we can do is just refuse to kowtow to them. The likes of me and Blair White regularly bring up topics that are going to be deemed as controversial within the trans community. We do this fully expecting what kind of blowback we'll get. We know what this community is like, and especially if you're someone who doesn't really know it, it can be quite scary, or someone who thinks that they are safe, like Contrapoints did. But what are your thoughts on the topics that I've discussed this week? I'd love to know your thoughts, so you can leave them in the comments below. I do read every single one. Well, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy my content, you can subscribe and like this video. Please share it as well. That really helps me out. You can also support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all next time.
And a special thank you to James C. George, Rose Hypnol, The Port of Rizzo, The Leviathan, Laisha, James Dorans, James UK, Evil Moif, Kim Vandry, Sarah, and the rest of my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar.